bienvenue à cette conférence de presse virtuelle. Welcome to this virtual press conference. And today with us we have Alexandre Lecuziat, who is WFP Senior Regional Emergency Preparedness and Response Advisor with WFP, and Eric Branckaert, WFP Senior Vulnerability Analysis and Mapping Advisor. And I will give the floor to Alexandre Lecuziat. Alexandre, the floor is yours about this food security in Central Sahel. Thank you.
Liz, can you hear me? Hello? Just checking on sound. Can you hear me? Okay, thanks, Daniel. I think I'll leave the floor to Eric first for the briefing on the needs. So he's going to start first, and then I can come in with a quick update on response plans and maybe a little bit on COVID. I'm sure it will be on everybody's mind. And then I'm supposing we'll have a round of question and answers. So over to you, Eric.
Good morning. I hope everybody can hear me. Okay. So I suppose we are going in English. Therefore, I'm unsure about your knowledge about the overall framework under which we are working in the West Africa and Sahel and West Africa. So very briefly, here in Sahel in West Africa, we are working to analyze food security and nutrition situation under what we called the Cadre Harmonisé, which is a framework combining data analysis with expert knowledge. It's conducted twice a year, and it starts with main indicator on food security and nutrition compilation taken at the national level of 17 countries here in the region. From the national level, national analysis are conducted, which are afterwards consolidated and verified at the regional level. Once it is done, the results are published and distributed through various entities, which are the PREJEC and the RPCA. If you need more details on this acronym, I can give them later on, but I don't want to spend too much time on that at this moment. The experts participating into this framework are those from government entities. So we have several food security group within each nation participating, which are combined with technical expert from international organization, FAO, WFP, UNICEF, but we have also NGO, Oxfam, SAVE, ACF, to name a few, and we have other intelligence or information analysis group like FuseNet from the US. So this is done twice a year, and this year we did the analysis just now, and we are releasing all the results at the time I'm speaking right now, as we completed the cycle of this first part of this of the year. So about the results themselves, what we are seeing this year is a clear deterioration of the situation. And I'm going to go global. If you need, overall situation, if you need details on any countries, I can obviously answer to this question later on. So the deterioration, and I'm giving you directly the final results, is we are going from, for the lean season, the upcoming months, June to September, the analysis concluded that we are going from 10.8 million people declared food insecure last year, 2019, to 19.1 million people in 2020. This is an increase of 77% from last year, and it's unprecedented. And really unprecedented. It's been now 5 years that I'm working in this position, and we haven't seen such number, which is explained by several factors, or what deteriorating factors will say on the food security and nutrition. I will come back to these a little bit later. The hotspots are unfortunately recurrent hotspot over the year, with a clear deterioration this year. And namely, it's Cameroon, where we have the southwest Cameroon, but also the extreme north Cameroon. We have the Lecuziat Basin, which is serious deterioration, and that's northeast Nigeria, Difa region in Niger. We have the Liptako Goma area, which is the three border area between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. We have substantial deterioration for the overall Burkina Faso. Next to that, and that's a new trend this year, we have also two coastal countries raising up into the figures, namely Sierra Leone and Liberia. The contributing factor to this situation are the security situation. That's the Sahel hotspot I just described you, with increased insecurity incidents over the years, and it's continuing to escalate this year. This results on serious movement of population and internally displaced person. We do have also a biomass, so that's the feeding of livestock impact, specifically for Niger, for Senegal, Mauritania, and some area in Mali. On top of that, we obviously have the COVID-19 coming our way, and I have to mention that this analysis, so the 19.1 million people food insecure, do not include the COVID-19 possible impact. We are currently running simulation and scenario to try to estimate that impact, remembering that that impact is not only the potential impact of this COVID-19 is not only the direct impact as we are seeing them globally in the world. So the direct are quarantine, are the people infected and affected by the disease, but we have also, and that will have an impact on urban area and the most vulnerable or poverty people in this area. But the midterm impact is also analysis, as the COVID-19 have an impact on all the supply chain, the market with the closing of market, the disruption on borders exchange, and closure of border, the limitation of movement of what we call transhumance for those living on the livestock. And all these are potentially on a really serious increased deterioration for all the population which are declared at this moment vulnerable. Again, simulation and analysis are ongoing at the moment. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, we have another risk coming to our monitoring tool, and that's the locust. If you are a little bit aware what happened this year in the East Africa, there has been massive locust infestation a few months ago, and we have seen dramatic picture of these. These locusts are moving and that's a normal behavior, and are implementing themselves in Sahel and North Sahel now. So the impact of these are not yet there, because there are no alert on that level now. However, the risk is very high, as they might, all the analysis show that they could spread out as from June July, August. That will have another deterioration factor on all the production expected and therefore access to food. I will close here on the situation. That gives you the general picture of the situation. I repeat, we are going to 19.1 million people declared food insecure for the lean season, so June to September, with two main risk or deteriorating factor on markets, COVID-19 and the locust. As per the response and what we are going forward to alleviate or to face this situation, I will leave the floor to Alexandre. Over to you.
Yes, Alexandre. Yeah, I think Alexandre will, I'll give the floor to Alexandre and then the floor will be open for question. I don't know if you hear me. Thank you so much, Eric, for your introductory remarks.
Okay. Yeah, Danielle, I was trying to turn it on, but the host had muted me. I'm not sure who's hosting, but I was muted. I think we all adjust to that anyway. It's the first time I do a press conference in those conditions. Thanks very much, I'm sure for everyone. Thanks very much, Eric, for the overview. I mean, this is very fresh information, I think just off today's RPCA. Thanks for that. In terms of the response, and again, I'm not sure how much everybody here knows about the operation ongoing, but WFP is active in 19 countries in the region, and mostly on the hotspots that are and have been highlighted by Eric. I'd like to mention first that we have our level 3 emergency response in the Central Sahel, which has been one of the key hotspots in the past 12, 18 months, on which our response has largely been focusing and scaled up. That's where the biggest increase in needs and our response last year has been focusing. So the L3 was activated in September for us last year. And one of the key factor that Eric described that was already at play is that with the conflict, the number of populations displaced was making the increase in needs not only seasonal, but throughout the year. So we have had to start increasing our response as early as the end of the lean season last year in September. A gradual increase from 0.9 million across the 3 countries of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger to about 1.5 million people assisted in February. We intend to push this further to almost double of that, close to 3 million as part of the response at the peak of the lean season. This is complementing efforts by the government and by partners. I have to mention here that these are planned figures, not resourced. So we also have an ask in contributions to be able to scale that up, which currently stands for the next 6 months and only for the Central Sahel at $208 million. That's the ask put forward as part of the effort to scale further up our operation in the 3 countries. I must stress as well that this is not incorporating the latest projections that were just released today. So this is just as is for the implementation plan. And we're faced, as you would all know, with this difficult moment when we have to scale up operations further at a time when COVID-19 is spreading in the region and has a double effect. It is likely to increase further the livelihoods needs and the food assistance needs, as Eric highlighted. It is also crippling operations. It is also, by all the mitigation measures, reducing our ability, or will make it a lot more difficult to increase our operations. The second hotspot, as Eric mentioned, is Cameroon. Also there, we have been scaling up operations and will further scale up operations. The 3 Cs, as we refer to them, CAR, Chad, Cameroon, but also Nigeria, are areas where we see significant increases. There are also countries where the spread of the COVID is accelerating fast. Most of the countries I just mentioned have now reported over 200 cases confirmed. And that is clearly, again, something that is likely to create more needs as livelihoods will be impacted, and also reducing our ability to respond. So we have a critical time ahead of us to make sure that we combine this. Eric mentioned the coastal countries. We're present in most of those countries as well. I'll mention 2 things on this. One is that we are scaling up our crisis responses in those countries. We're also concerned by the coastal countries because they are key supply routes and supply chain corridors for the operations in the Central Sahel. So the impact of the COVID is felt on livelihoods, but also possibly on the supply routes to the Central Sahel. I'll just maybe finish before we take questions on the fact that overall in the region, if we look at the net funding requirements for the 6 months ahead of us, so taking us all the way to the end of the lean season by September, is about $500 million, so $500 million US. That's for the 19 countries in the region for the next 6 months. Liz, maybe I'll stop here and we can open for a round of questions if that's fine.
Yes, I think I can't see who is online, and I don't see the journalists, so the floor is open for question, and I leave it to our UN experts to give them the floor. Catherine, the floor is yours.
Yes, hi. Because I raised my hand, but apparently, may I go on? Je peux continuer? Okay. You hear me? Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. I suppose the others can hear you too. Please go ahead, Catherine.
Okay. So my first question is, are you in charge of 17 or 19 countries, 19? That is my first question, because one spoke about 17 countries and the other one on 19 countries. The other thing that I wanted to make sure, because you spoke quite fast, is the Central Sahel. Is it Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger? Is it correct? I don't hear. Okay.
Yes, Catherine, just to confirm that, yes, when we refer to Central Sahel, it is the 3 countries that you mentioned correctly: Niger, okay, Burkina Faso, and Mali. Over.
Okay, and you are in charge of 19 countries.
It's correct. WFP has operations active in 19 countries in the region. Over.
Okay, and if I understood well, you spoke about plus 0.9% of what? Of movement? Is it, and which period? I didn't catch that one.
I think I'll have to refer to Eric. I think that was his contribution. If you can
unmute my colleague. You spoke also about $208 million US for Central Sahel. Correct. Is it for the 6 months ahead?
Yes, that's correct. So we calculate this on 6 months, starting from next month all the way to the end of the lean season. So that's the combined fund requirement for the next 6 months for the Central Sahel countries' operations.
Starting May?
Starting April.
Oh, starting, so from now on, okay.
Correct.
April plus 6, okay. And my other question was regarding, yes, you said that you were at level 3. We are not UN staff, so I know that it's very high about insecurity. So could you elaborate a little bit more on that one, please?
Yes, of course, and apologies if we used jargon. Please ask all questions to explicit this. I was assuming that it was a more regular UN group of journalists. The L3...
We are, excuse me, we are UN, but we're not staff.
No offense meant. Yeah, so the L3 is in the levels of emergencies, not security. And
Okay.
or 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. 3 is the highest indeed. There is an important distinction, is that you can have a system-wide L3 or only activated agency by agency. As far as Central Sahel is concerned, I was referring to WFP level 3 emergency. So it's the highest, and it means that all corporate attention and resources are prioritized to support the operations there.
Okay.
If I may answer, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Please do, sir.
Okay. No, just your two questions. The 17 versus 19 countries is because I presented the cadre harmonisé results, which just been out today, and that's 17 countries. Going forward, when we are talking about WFP operation, we are including Central Africa as well, and South Tome as well, but that's not relevant fully in terms of figures. So the 17 countries I was referring to is 19.1 million people, and that's an increase of 77% from last year for the lean season. If we extend to the 19 countries, then we would get 21 million people in needs. So it's a different perspective as per the geographical coverage. And obviously, when talking about operation of WFP, we are taking the whole portfolio of countries that we are to respond to in the region until me and Alex are not responsible but participate to the operation. I was more focusing on the cadre harmonisé result of this morning. Over.
Okay, thank you so much, Eric. It was very, very clear. The explanation was very clear. And the last thing my last question was about the Cameroon and Lake Chad basin. We know that there's high insecurity also in that region. So how do you guys work there?
Yeah, so in a number of those countries, indeed, the conflict is an added layer of complexity, as Eric briefed on. So we do have a field presence with our partners and directly for our teams in sub-offices in all those areas. The security measures vary from one country to the other, as well as the access strategies we have. It's largely funded on our key humanitarian principles of independence, humanity, and neutrality, making sure that we provide the assistance in an impartial manner in all those areas and by active engagement with all the communities. So there can be instances where the operations can be suspended because of insecurity, but it's only temporary. And as far as I know at the moment, we're able to operate in almost all of those areas, and we'll continue to try to do that. Over.
Okay, thank you. And my last question was regarding Burkina Faso. Most of UN agencies are very worried about the situation there because like you mentioned before, they have the threat of Locust, they have the insecurity, they have also problems, political problems, internal political problems. So what is the situation for you? Have you seen a big increase of IDPs there?
Yes, that's correct. I'm sure Eric will be able to complement, but initially on your question on the IDPs, Burkina Faso is now, if not the first, at least one of the most or the fastest growing displaced population crisis in the world. It's a country that virtually had no IDPs, internally displaced populations, 18 months ago. And now the latest official figures are in excess of 800,000 people displaced. So it is the fastest growing, or one of the fastest growing IDP crises in the world. This is largely one of the reasons why we've escalated it to a level 3 emergency response in this area. And this is also where we have seen the largest increase in our operations as part of the emergency response. Eric, would you like to complement?
No, you just give the figures, and that's correct about the increase. 18 months ago, it was 0, and we are now 800,000 plus, over.
Comme vous parlez français, vous pouvez nous donner les raisons en français aussi, pourquoi dans ces 18 mois, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé de spécial?
Depuis 18 mois et les premiers indicateurs que nous avions eus, qui étaient une augmentation de la violence par des groupes armés tout au nord du Burkina Faso, dans les zones frontalières avec le Mali, s'est finalement étendu. Et donc le nombre de personnes déplacées par les violences a augmenté au début graduellement. Donc là, je parle de fin 2018, début 2019, pour ensuite augmenter très, très rapidement dans le cours de l'année 2019. Et jusqu'à présent, ça continue à s'accélérer. Donc on est passé à nouveau de presque 0 personnes déplacées sur le territoire à plus de 800 000 personnes maintenant. Et cela exclusivement lié à des problèmes d'insécurité et de violence qui frappent les populations civiles.
Merci beaucoup à vous deux.
Merci.
Je ne sais pas s'il y a d'autres questions. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres journalistes? Any other question? Apart from Catherine. Merci Catherine, en tout cas, pour ces questions. Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un d'autre qui veut poser une question? Non.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, hi, Lisa. Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Oh, God, this is horrible.
Ah, sorry. It's also horrible for us because it's not easy. And thank you to our UN TV and UN radio experts in Geneva because they are doing their best, but it's quite
okay,
difficult.
just
go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I'm going to assume that you all hear me loud and clear. Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. You can't hear me, but the correct finger is up. Okay. Maybe the best, most practical way to do this is if you would take a few notes. I will ask you a few questions. I will be, slow so you understand. And I want to move away from the numbers and go a little bit into the impact of this awful situation that you have described upon the people themselves. All right. First, I think you gave a number on how many confirmed cases there were in the area of coronavirus. I think I missed that. If you would repeat that. Now, what I'd like to know is what is the impact of this food shortage upon these millions of people in West Africa in the Sahel region? Do you expect many people to be without food and many to die? Do you have any figures on the situation of malnutrition in the area? And to tie it in with the potential with COVID, malnutrition or lack of nutrition creates illness, and that is a very big problem when it comes to coronavirus and all by itself. Now, you talk about level 3, and my good colleague Catherine mentioned that we're not UN bureaucrats, we're not. So how many levels are there? And I think maybe level 4, if I remember, is on the verge of famine. How close is the area to being so short of food that they could actually be close to famine? Shall I continue, or have you had enough of me? One more thing is that because of the fighting, 2 more things. because of the fighting, and you alluded to it, you must have some difficulty of access to the people. How do you get around that? And lastly, I know you mentioned that your report does not take into account COVID-19, but you fully expect that this will be a problem. How will you and your colleagues protect themselves from getting infected by this deadly disease? Thank you very much. If you need me to repeat anything, or I'll try not to bug you too much, so I'll, be happy to listen to your answers. Thank you.
It's okay.
Eric, would you like to go first on the expected impact on needs, and then I can provide some answers on the two last questions on access, our response, and protection of our staff. Yeah.
Very briefly, the impact is it's clearly household disruption and livelihood disruption, which are identified. So will these population go directly into starvation? This is the case of slow onset situation. So it's gonna take time, and that's why we are putting in place monitoring system to make sure that we are monitoring the situation, both on market and food security situation. Just to point one, I'm going to take a table. I mean, you won't see it, but just a table that I have here. The cadre harmonisé, the way we analyze things is that we have different phases. And at this moment, so in the phase, what we call phase 3, phase 4, and then phase 5 is famine. We are currently in phase 4, a mix of phase 3 and 4. And that's the number I gave you, so 19 million. What we are seeing this year is that we have already, I mean, we are foreseeing this year, because we are speaking lean season, we are already seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So at least 9 locations in the hotspot I talked about earlier, 9 locations where we are switching to what we call the phase 4 or emergency situation. So, and overall, we are speaking about already 1.4 million people in direct needs of support. So these will be our topmost priority. The impact, the foreseen impact, is that the all rest, so the phase 3, as well as some from phase 2, will fall as the time goes on into a worsening situation. And times is counting months here, it's not year. It's really until the end of the lean season. And they will fall gradually to this situation, potentially exacerbating more displacement. And the way it's handled is that people will deplete first their stocks, then they will try to sell assets. They might go to what we call coping strategy, which could be negative coping strategy. So it's moving away from their lands, that's displacement. It's also, wrong behavior, that happen as well. Increased security or violence, that's also to happen. If you cannot move your herd and you are blocked and you need to move your herd instead in order to keep your assets, then you might force the passage. And these are the elements which will certainly deteriorate the situation. On the malnutrition, the overall figures, and that's thank you very much for that question, by the way, because I forgot to mention it. So again, I'm focusing 18 countries because these are the figures I have at hand. We are going from 8.2 children with severe malnutrition last year, 2019, to expected 12 million in the 18 countries this year. So alongside the life-saving or the emergency in terms of food or other means to sustain food for the population, we have this quite substantial number of children in need of nutritious food. And that's an all other, I mean, it's part of our operation and response. Over to you. I hope I answer your question. Over to you, Alex.
Do you hear me at all?
Yes, we do.
Oh, you do, incredible. Sorry. Eric, I'm sorry. On the malnutrition, I missed the numbers you had. Could you give them again? That is, how many children are malnourished? What do they need? And do you expect, are they at the risk of death?
Well, so it's 12 million children in global acute malnutrition status. That's what we have for the lean projected for the lean season starting in the next 3 months. So that's 12 million. That's global acute malnutrition. From that, but I don't have the figures in front of me, you will have indeed severe acute malnutrition. And that proportion, these one, if we are blocked to give them support, might have a risk of death. But I don't have that percentage, and I don't have that figures of the severe acute malnutrition. I only have the global acute malnutrition in front of me.
Yeah, but the point is that if they don't get the nutrition that they need, they could die or could get very sick. I mean, this goes back to the appeal that you're making.
No, I mean, correct. I would die. It's not 12 million who are going to die. So it's a part of it. If we are blocked into operation, and it's a slow onset. So it's going to take a few months. Again, we have 3 months and 5-6 months until September. And that's why we are embarking quite strongly on ensuring that our supply chain, that our action are taking place. And by the way, we are doing that with UNICEF as well, so that we can alleviate the risk of, and then I go with what you are mentioning, the risk of falling into a worse situation that we are describing, which would be a famine. The famine is calculated on the number of deaths and will be estimated. At this moment in time, we are not yet there. And we might not go there because we do have systems in place to alleviate that potentiality so far. So, and I say so far because the big risk is the closure of border, the closure of market, and not opening humanitarian corridor from those partners we are engaged with to support the population in need. Over to you. I hope I answer now. Sorry.
Thank you.
Alex?
Yeah, I'll pick it up from there, Lisa, if it's okay, and continue on that line of malnutrition, because I think that's linked also to the impact of the COVID. One of the key concerns we have, aside, of course, of the increased level of morbidity and fragility of all those children, is the overall global supply chain, including on supplementary feeding products and nutrition products. Some of the bigger companies, and indeed the main suppliers globally, are in countries that are currently under strict confinement and a very reduced level of production. A lot of the nutritious products are produced in India or France, for example, where factories have had to reduce or close or reduce significantly their production. We have big concerns on this, and our supply chain colleagues, together with UNICEF, are looking at locally available enriched foods to complement this. But that, on top of the increased needs, is on the capacity to respond to this. So I think the numbers that Eric was mentioning and are going to be aggravated by this COVID global impact. You also had a question on the number of COVID cases. I will not obviously give you a number by country or even overall in the region. It's increasing every day. I would refer to the Johns Hopkins dashboard that provides a day-to-day live update of the number of cases. What we want to stress is that in some of the countries that Eric flagged as hotspots, are also the countries, unfortunately, that have experienced the highest incidence of new cases of COVID and the active transmission. Burkina Faso, unfortunately, is one of them, and will now experience the spread of the COVID as an added layer to chronic food insecurity, chronic undernutrition, violence, and displacements. The link to security, to go back to one of your questions too, I think Burkina is an example of what unfortunately happens in a number of other countries. And the Lake Chad Basin, for example, is another area where you have millions of people displaced. Burkina Faso is the most recently affected by violence-induced displacements. In the case of Burkina Faso, to be specific to your question, Lisa, what we've seen is whole villages and whole families having to leave because of violence. And as Eric was saying, these are families that have left with very little livelihoods, left the crops behind them, and with very little ability to sustain their livelihoods as the season comes in. We're talking about families that had to flee violence and flee to urban or peri-urban areas where their livelihoods is significantly reduced, and what Eric used as a term, coping strategies, is very diminished. So the assistance we provide really is for those families a lifeline. It is life-saving. We'll continue to provide it during the lean season. But again, I want to stress for all people attending this discussion that the COVID, not just on the health impact, but also on the global supply chain and the ability to move is very difficult. Lastly, and you'll tell me if we covered all your questions, you had this question about frontline humanitarian workers and how do we protect them. This is at the heart of our response, of course, in terms of duty of care for our partners and for our staff who are in frontline to work with communities, work with beneficiaries, and provide this life-saving or livelihoods, indeed, assistance. We are all, and when I say all is everyone, UN agencies, NGOs, governments, rushing to provide basic protective equipment for people that will have to be working in those conditions. It's a global rush. You would know from the global media that this is the case everywhere, that we struggle to find masks and to find basic protective equipment. But this is what we're doing. We're providing this to our staff, and whoever is in the front line will have access to this protective equipment. I must say as well that in order to be protecting our staff, beneficiaries, communities, we obviously have to adjust a number of our activities as part of the response. Just to give two very practical examples. As you can imagine, food assistance is provided in areas where lots of families or individuals would gather. Restrictions entail that we need to limit the number of people that gather. So we need to fragment the number of sites of distribution. The maximum numbers vary from one country to the other, but in general, not more than 50 people can be gathered. And even when those people can be gathered, we are implementing standard operating procedures to minimize the transmission of the disease. So there's a temperature check for all people coming into the distribution sites. And we have to respect 1 meter between every individual coming to get the food assistance. So you can imagine the increased length of time that this takes, the increased cost for our partners, for ourselves. It is very difficult. The other concrete example I can give is that for all livelihood community type of activities, where it's community-based asset creation, for example, or community work, this has to be either suspended or reduced to only individual level activities. We will not have group or community activities as the cases of COVID-19 spread in those countries. Finally, and that is going back to the appeal for funding, one of the key objectives we have to sustain those operations is to front load, so to procure and pre-position as close as possible to the communities, the rations and the food assistance for the next 3 months. There's a global appeal that came out to all our donors globally, not for the region, but globally, it's about 1.9 billion US dollars that we will need to preposition 3 months of food and make sure that there will be no break in our assistance, life-saving assistance in the world. This is not for the region, this is globally. Lisa, back to you if that covered your questions.
Lisa, is it okay with you? Do you have follow-up question? Or I give the floor to Catherine, who has another question.
Yes, another thing that I would like to know is have more infos regarding the two coastal countries, meaning Sierra Leone and Liberia. I thought that Sierra Leone had a food insecure population that was decreasing. So could you please update me a little bit on these two countries and explain why, I mean, they are in fact now in your study, I mean, considered as countries that are threatened?
Okay. Okay. So that for Sierra Leone and Liberia, this is an economic impact previous to the COVID, which has been highlighted for several times now into our analysis. Again, it's the analysis of the whole community through the cadre harmonisé. The figures that we were seeing, and by the way, we don't have the figures for Liberia, were unfortunately, because of the decrease of attention few years back on these two countries, attention because they were going better previous to the market and the economic situation they are facing at the moment. The investment to collect information on food security were a bit less prioritized by the countries themselves. So we couldn't engage into more analysis in terms of survey and assessment. This was changed last year because of the economic disruption, and we engaged more to ensure that assessment were conducted, and that's the results that we have seen in Sierra Leone, which has been taken into consideration of this analysis. Sierra Leone, we are speaking about 1.3 million people foreseen to be food insecure from June to September. This is quite new from what we had the few years back, and I agree with you. So quite a concern. Liberia, we do not have the results yet because the assessment is ongoing at the moment I'm speaking, and we are speaking here today. So that will come into the picture in the next few weeks, I expect, because the assessment is ongoing. And just again, we mentioned it earlier, these are coastal countries, and they are quite linked with market and economic exchange with their neighbors, and the potential for an extra layer of impact on the figures that we are seeing for Sierra Leone, for example, might be added with the COVID impact described earlier. I hope I answered. Over to you.
Just to follow up, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, because both countries are, I mean, they don't have even 10 cases COVID. You know, both countries have imported cases. If I remind well, both have below 10 cases. So you mean that there would be an impact, a COVID impact on the bigger countries that they're trading with?
The problem is the local production or the national production of food versus what they import. Frankly, I do not have that analysis with me right now. That's very specific to these two countries. But if, because of the global COVID situation and the disruption of the supply chain, as well as closing of border, as we are seeing a bit everywhere, to avoid the spread of the pandemic, and in this country, they will have to take, or if not taking action about that, that might, and that's part of the simulation that we want to calculate now, that we are engaging now in calculation, that might indeed have an impact on these two countries, because they are not self-sustained in terms of providing food for the population. There's a lot of exchange. So that's the risk, that it's further deteriorates for them. It's not.
So I mean, these two countries are importing a lot of food. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, correct. Is the importing part if the border are closed or transport?
Yeah, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry to come back on that, but I think that it's a lot of speculation for countries that, I mean, I understand when we talk about countries like Spain or Italy that are really affected by COVID, there's a lot of speculation going on the African continent, if. But I would like to come back to reality. What you are saying, that you just told us that 1.3 million people in Sierra Leone would be are foreseen to be food insecure. So when?
Okay. Yeah.
And why?
Okay. So and we elements are given that is going to be the same for Liberia. These figures are not taking into consideration COVID. And I agree with you that for these two countries, elements might be that the COVID will not have such an impact on their current situation. That's part of an economic breakdown over the past months, and years. So it's not related with the COVID. It's part of on these two. It's part of the exchange rate, and there have been a massive impact on their currency and massive inflation over the last year. And that's the impact on the food. I mean, it's one of the main causes of the food security impact that we are foreseeing. And we did a full assessment on food security for Sierra Leone. I give you 1.3 million. That's what we are projecting for the next, for the lean season. Currently, the figures is 1 million people in Sierra Leone, because I didn't mention the current situation. But it's the result of the assessment agreed with the government and our partners is 1 million in Sierra Leone in needs because of an economic breakdown.
An economic breakdown in the rest of the world?
No.
Locally?
Correct.
Locally?
Correct. It's okay. Sierra Leone and Liberia, economic breakdown with quite substantial inflation rates. And the main cause is exchange rate and the currency being, how to say that, impacted.
En français alors.
Même en français. C'est un problème d'échange par rapport à leur monnaie qui a généré des taux d'inflation relativement conséquents qui effectivement ont un impact direct sur les plus pauvres et les plus vulnérables dans un pays. Qui ne peuvent plus subvenir à leurs besoins parce que ce sont des pays qui sont importateurs. Donc, du coup, je dois encore vérifier pour le Liberia, mais ils importent beaucoup de leurs denrées et tout n'est pas produit dans le pays. Et donc, le résultat de la Sierra Leone et du Liberia n'est pas un résultat de Covid, mais un résultat d'une situation économique en détérioration depuis plusieurs années, depuis, je crois que c'est 1 ou 2 ans. D'accord? Est-ce que ça répond à la question?
Quel était le nombre de populations, en tout cas pour le Sierra Leone, de personnes qui étaient qui avaient des problèmes justement d'accès à la nourriture l'année dernière, 2019? Parce que le 1,3 million, c'est une projection.
Non. Le 1,3 million, c'est une projection. La situation courante qui est issue de l'enquête qui a été faite en janvier février de cette année, 2020, montre 1 million de personnes. Je peux vous donner le chiffre un peu pour être sûr que je ne vous raconte pas. Sierra Leone, oui, 1 million de personnes. La situation de 2019, je dois pour cela, donnez-moi 2 minutes. Mais je ne sais pas vous répondre comme ça sur le chiffre.
Entre-temps. Je dis que sinon, Alexandre peut meubler, s'il a quelque chose à ajouter.
Je veux bien meubler sur la base d'une question, si vous en avez une en particulier.
Bah, comment est-ce que vous, en tant que PAM, vous voyez les choses aussi par rapport peut-être à une augmentation des tarifs justement des aliments que vous achetez? Parce que est-ce que vous allez être affecté? Parce que ça, ce serait intéressant comme projection, c'est-à-dire que comme les donateurs classiques sont des pays qui sont effectivement touchés par le Covid-19 de manière très importante, et ça continue. J'imagine qu'ils vont d'abord se tourner vers l'aide nationale pour aider leur pays à s'en sortir et leur économie qu'ils vont devoir ramasser à la petite cuillère avant de s'occuper des autres. Comment est-ce que vous restez quand même positif? Est-ce que vous croyez en la fidélité de vos donateurs là-dessus pour vous aider?
Alors, je crois que c'est le sens de l'appel global qui a été lancé par le secrétaire général, dans lequel le PAM s'est inscrit. Et je crois à l'impératif de solidarité. Je crois que c'est ça sur lequel le PAM s'est appuyé pour contribuer à cet appel global, donc qui inclut notamment une partie de ce qu'on appelle services partagés, shared services, pour faire un appui à la communauté humanitaire et aux États sur tout ce qui est achat et approvisionnement logistique, et y compris transport de cargo, éventuellement passagers là où ce sera nécessaire, avec nos services Humanitarian Air Services. Donc oui, on continue à faire appel à nos donateurs. Vous avez raison, on va être dans un moment très complexe au niveau global de la plupart des grands donateurs. Néanmoins, je pense qu'il est mis assez en évidence que c'est une responsabilité collective, et donc nous croyons à cette responsabilité collective et à la solidarité des bailleurs pour répondre à cette crise.
Merci.
Je peux enchaîner si vous voulez. Oui, donc pour la Sierra Leone. Donc les chiffres, je vais parler au niveau courant pour éviter l'amalgame de ce qui est projeté ou des implications Covid. Donc, comme je le disais, la situation en Sierra Leone, c'est que les années précédentes, il n'y a pas eu d'enquête systématique de large envergure dans l'ensemble du pays. Donc, on a un effet d'analyse où on a couvert plus de personnes dans l'enquête qui a été réalisée en ce début d'année. Par rapport à et ça, on arrive à 1 million de personnes déclarées en insécurité alimentaire suite à une enquête faite. L'année passée, cela représentait 1% de la population par rapport à la population générale. Cette année, on est à 12% de population. Ce 1 million de personnes, c'est 12%. L'année passée, c'est 1%. Si je vais au niveau de la projection, 1,3 million, c'est 10 fois plus que l'année passée au niveau de la projection. On était à 130 000 personnes l'année passée. Et je répète que c'est clairement dû par des causes de dévaluation de la monnaie du pays et de tout ce qui s'ensuit au niveau de l'économie du pays. C'est clairement ça le facteur contributif principal par rapport à la situation du Sierra Leone. J'espère que j'ai répondu. Dites-moi. Est-ce que j'ai répondu à votre question?
Je disais merci beaucoup. Voilà, on m'a réactivé parce qu'on m'avait coupé, on m'avait aussi coupé la chic, comme on dit. Merci beaucoup, c'était très clair.
Oui. J'aurais voulu peut-être demander à Eric de résumer un petit peu la situation qui a été traduite par Chris Nicoy, le directeur régional du PAM, sur la gravité de la situation, peut-être si on n'a pas d'autres questions. Et puis peut-être souligner que pour les donateurs, en fait, le monde est interconnecté. Et si nous ne regardons pas ce qui se passe ailleurs, eh bien, ça peut nous revenir, si on peut dire, sur le visage, si on peut prendre cette expression. Donc, si Eric pouvait peut-être, en anglais, résumer la gravité de la situation par une formule un petit peu, plus forte, comme l'a fait Chris Nicoy. Merci, Eric.
Wow, thank you for this question. It's a very tricky one, I would say. Well, as a food security analyst, what I'm seeing this year with such number for the whole region of 19.1 million people, excluding Central Africa, including is 21 million people. What I'm seeing is a really, really serious and dire situation for the population to come. And it shows, unfortunately, the several factors contributing to that, with extra new factors coming into the game. And that's, and that's why the WFP is doing whatever we can to ensure that we can sustain the operation at this moment in time. So to avoid that it's getting even worse. That's what I would say. I mean, it's a very dire situation. I haven't seen it for the last 5 years I'm here. Is the highest number ever in terms of the analysis done, which is built on assessment. Is not only expert talking and building up scenario from the top of their head. This comes from assessment and queries to the population themselves, which give us these results. It's complemented by expert, obviously. And so for me, it's a very dire situation with several deteriorating factors on all fronts. Security, climate impact, the pest with the locust, the supply chain, again, with the COVID, and then population moving, therefore losing their livelihood, losing their way of life. That's what I would say. Over.
Okay, thank you. Alex, do we have other questions? If not, maybe Alexandre, you would like to say a word before we conclude?
Well, maybe echoing what Eric was just saying. So we're faced with the largest number of people that will require food assistance in the last 5 years, and this is even without factoring the impact COVID will have, and without speculating on the number of cases that there will be in the region. The impact will be felt because the impact of COVID is not just on the number of people that will fall ill, but also on the food systems and the supply chain. So whilst we gear up for our response in the Central Sahel and the other hotspots that Eric highlighted in his analysis, we'll need all the international community support to be able to gather all the resources required. Again, $208 million for the next 6 months just for the Central Sahel, and about 500 million overall in the region are required in the next 6 months to cover food assistance during the lean season when the food needs will peak. So we can only plea our donors to maintain and scale up their support to allow us to meet the needs that we've highlighted in the analysis.
Okay, thank you. So we have no other question from what I see. I would like to thank you both, Eric, Alexandre,
thank you very much.
For taking the time, because I know that you've launched simultaneously this report in Dakar and in Geneva. So I would like to thank our colleague from UN Radio, UN TV, Michele, François, all the colleagues, Daniel, for organizing this virtual press conference. And I suppose you have some other interviews to give after that. And I wish you all the best. Take care, stay safe, and thank you again to all.
And same for all of you. Stay safe. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.